Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome to today's webinar revolving around securing your cloud infrastructure with Wiz and Tines. My name is Pete Wren, and I am a solutions engineer here at Tines, and I'm really excited to show off the powerful combo of these two tools by pairing the vast amount of different alerts that Wiz provides for your cloud environment, paired with the robust automated remediation that's empowered by Tines. Before we get started, I wanted to let everybody know that throughout this session, if any questions pop into your head, please add them in the box below this video, and we'll be sure to answer them at the end during our allotted Q&A session. Today, I'm going to highlight this powerful combo through two different workflows. The first one being the remediation of exposed public S3 buckets. And the second one being malware issues, which we will be remediating with SentinelOne today as our endpoint tool of choice. Before I dive into the specifics of this story, I want to provide a brief intro to Tines for those who may be relatively new to the platform. Tines is the smart, secure workflow builder for your whole team. We aim to break down barriers across systems with fewer duplicate efforts, unnecessary alerts, and information silos. In Tines terminology, a story is synonymous with a playbook, workflow, or runbook. And a story represents your automation journey through a sequence of action steps, which you can see represented right here in the center of the storyboard. Over here in the left-hand side of the storyboard, you'll see a list of our 7 core action types, which are the tools in your toolbox that allow you to automate any process. First, we have our webhook action, which enables the real-time ingest alerts from tools like Wiz. Next, we have our HTTP request action, aka what you use to make API calls to other tools. Like you can see here at the top, you can use it to ingest alerts like you see here with Wiz alerts, or it can also be used to output data into other tools like you see with our create issue in Jira and our post message to Slack actions here. We have distinct action types for sending and receiving emails. And then you can control the flow of data throughout a story. Think of this like your if-then logic through our trigger action. As the name implies, with the event transform, all of your data transformation needs can be found within here. And finally, you can create powerful, reusable functions with our send to story action. Now, this is just a very brief overview of what these do. I will be sure to cover more about what these actions do in greater detail as I go along with running through the story itself. Up next, you'll find our templates library. This is a catalog of a vast amount of pre-configured HTTP request actions for you to connect to any tool within your stack. And one thing I want to highlight about these templates is that they show how Tines is completely vendor agnostic. All of these examples that you'll see in this library are simply just customized, configured versions of our standard boilerplate HTTP request action, which you see right here. The other big way that Tines is vendor agnostic is that even if something isn't within our templates library, we support connecting to it. First and foremost, you could just go ahead and fill this out yourself. Or a really cool feature of Tines is that in a lot of API documentation, let's say I want to connect to this endpoint that will say we don't have an action template for. Most API documentation these days provides curl commands for you to quickly test these endpoints out. You can actually copy a curl command from any API documentation, go back to your story, and then if you hit Command or Control V, depending on the kind of machine you're on, you'll notice here that Tines went ahead and parsed that curl command for you and used it to build out an HTTP request action with all the proper configurations. So all you really have to do is maybe rename it, tweak a couple things to make sure you're pointed at the right API credentials, and then you're up and running very quickly. Finally, on the bottom here, you'll see a modal pop out for our story library. Much like action templates are pre-configured HTTP request actions, a story library is a library of over 600 pre-built automations that our Tines Labs team has built that you can instantly import right into your Tines tenant in order to get some quick wins for you and your team. Finally, on the right-hand menu of the storyboard, you'll see some additional context and configuration options for the story as a whole or for a specific action step. Now that we've gone through our brief intro to Tines, I'll give you a quick overview of what the story in front of you is actually doing. So first, we're going to search for all public S3 bucket findings from Wiz. For each one, we're going to create an issue to track this finding in Jira. We're going to notify the analyst team via Slack. And within the Jira ticket, we're going to give that analyst the power to take the appropriate action. Should they choose to ignore this finding, it will just auto close the ticket with a comment that says no remediation steps were taken. Or if they choose to remediate, then it will set that S3 bucket back to private. It will confirm that action was completed within the JIRA ticket right here. And again, it will move that JIRA issue to done. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to run this workflow now so you can see this in action. As we start to go through this, you'll also notice that Tines easily supports API pagination, which we're doing here to make sure that we've completed a comprehensive search of all of the public S3 bucket findings from Wiz. How we can do pagination is through our trigger action, which just simply asks if there are more pages to be found from the Wiz API, and if so, continuing to loop through those until there are no more pages of data to be returned. You'll also notice in the upper right-hand corner of these first few actions, there are these little bubbles in the corner with a number next to them. This is reflective of our events in Tines. You can think of events as just simply the JSON payload that empowers your story to seamlessly exchange data between the different tools in your stack. And the way that event data is represented in a downstream action is through what we call in Tines as a pill. If we look inside of this pill right here, within the parentheses of this capitalized function, you will see the JSON path of the tree of the data point that is important to me for setting the priority of this ticket. In this case, it's just using Wiz's high priority distinction. And then outside of the parens, we have, for instance, our capitalize function. This is just one of several functions that allow you to transform your data in order to perfectly suit the needs of your process. And just a quick scroll through here of massive library of functions sorted by different data types and different processes. Finally, you can even see that we have a nice result preview here so that when you put something from your event JSON path into a formula, it'll show you what the expected output will be so you can verify everything looks correct and how you want this action step to behave. Next, we go through iterating findings through our event transform action. This specific event transform action uses what's called our explode mode. Our explode mode is just one of 6 different types of event transform modes we offer. And this specific mode allows you to iterate through each finding that we collected through our paginated set of API calls from Wiz and perform repeatable actions for each finding, like creating the issue in JIRA and posting the message about that alert to Slack for the analyst to see. One thing I will point out here is I set the limit of 1 intentionally for myself on this explode, just so that I don't inundate my JIRA board with a bunch of different tickets. Quick deep dive into some of the other modes that event transforms offer. We have the inverse of implode, which compiles all the results of an explode back together. We have our throttle, which makes it easy to work with rate limited APIs. We have our deduplicate, which helps you find novel events within a large group. We have message only, which is going to be common for variable creation or building of overall JSON payloads. And delay, which just sets a time delay until the next action step beneath it runs. We will see examples of some of these in the next story that I review. Moving down here to the create issue in JIRA, what I want to demonstrate here is that using some markdown format and calling upon the appropriate data through our event path, it's very easy to create a nice, well-curated JIRA ticket body. In this case, the syntax is going to represent as a table, which will surface all the critical components to the analyst that empower them to make decisions as fast as possible. Down here at the bottom, you'll notice that we are invoking our JIRA credential. This is our JIRA API key that's stored in Tines' native end-to-end encrypted credential vault. And as you can see by this syntax, we make it very easy to invoke the right API key to make this work. And finally, Up top here, you'll notice in the API URL that we use this concept of a resource. You can think of a resource as a reusable global variable. In this case, I am using this for my Jira domain in order to not repeat myself constantly when building API calls to Jira. Down here, we have the post message to Slack. You'll notice in the URL, the entire thing is covered in a resource. This is referring to an incoming webhook, which makes it very easy on the Slack side to post to the proper analyst channel. And then as you can see down here in the payload builder, we're utilizing Slack's block kit builder to create a well-crafted alert that's really easy to interpret for the analyst. Here, we can see that right here. So here we have just a tagline, new cloud configuration finding in Wiz. The rule name obviously being associated to a publicly exposed S3 bucket. Wiz has determined that this is a high severity alert on this specific object. So if we go look at the corresponding Jira ticket, you'll notice a couple that pop up here on my to-do board. Just pop open this one. In the description, here you'll find that nice custom formatted table that I showed you how to create within the API call, within that create issue in Jira action template. And then down here at the bottom, you'll see in the comments that the analyst has these remediation actions right in front of them. So again, if the analyst just clicks ignore, which I will do for this one, first of all, you'll get a visual representation that that prompt response has been recorded. If we go back to the Tines story, you'll see that we chose to ignore this. And when I refresh, you'll notice that this issue was marked as done. And in the comment below, we have confirmation that this was ignored and no remediation steps were taken. If we go look at this one, I'm going to head down the other side of the tree. I'm going to click remediate now, which again is going to give you visual confirmation that that prompt response has been recorded. And then if we look over here, based on the prompt response that we want to fix this, we have gone ahead and set the public access block policy so that this S3 bucket is no longer publicly exposed. And we have added a comment in Jira to confirm that that remediation step was taken and that the issue was marked as completed, which you can see here and here. So a little bit more of a deep dive into prompt. Prompt is a very useful and specific kind of function that returns text values back to Tines depending on the analyst's input, which you can trigger off of to obviously take different actions. As you can see here, behind those buttons we left in the Jira comment for remediate now, we have the prompt to fix, or the prompt here for ignore is to not fix. You can see for remediate, if the analyst responded with fix, we go down this way. If they did not fix or ignore, then we traverse down this path. So earlier I mentioned that Tines is vendor agnostic, but what does that really mean in a scenario like this? Well, let's just say for a thought experiment that you guys aren't a Slack shop. You're actually a Microsoft Teams shop. No problem. We make it really easy to switch between the two. So I'm going to go over into my templates and I'm going to use this post message to Teams template. And then I can just easily relocate this connector line from Slack over to Teams. Again, in the payload builder, you'll see that everything is configured properly to send to a Teams card. And then one of the other super powerful features of Tines is that we have the ability to what we call re-emit an event, which you can think of as replay. Now you can see the message was successfully posted to Teams. If I toggle over here, you'll see exact parity with that Slack alert that I showed you previously. The really cool thing about this re-emit is that this can be used anywhere within a story. So it makes it really easy as you're building and iterating to replay and test things in a vacuum so you can rapidly develop to confirm that this is going to suit your process. So real quick, let's recap what's happened in this story. Back at the beginning, we used pagination to search for all of the publicly available S3 bucket findings from Wiz. For each one, we exploded those findings and we created a Jira issue and posted a message to the analyst channel in Slack or Teams. Within the Jira issue, we added a comment that included remediation prompts so that the analyst was empowered to decide what the appropriate course of action was. And based on what their response was, we either auto-closed the issue or we set that S3 bucket back to private and confirmed that that behavior was completed while also moving this Jira issue to done. Coming from a software engineering background, I can tell you that many organizations have developers that are spinning up random S3 buckets like crazy for testing. And because they're really just wanting to rapidly iterate and test and get on with further development work, sometimes developers can get a little careless and they can leave loose ends like these improper configs out there in your fleet. But here in a matter of minutes, you can find every instance of where you have misconfigured S3 buckets, get them in front of your analysts quickly, and allow them to quickly remediate these so that they don't cause a problem for you down the road. And the best part about this is this entire story is already available for you to instantly import from our Tines story library. Once you click this import button, all you need to do is verify that everything is properly pointing at your specific Jira, AWS, Wiz, and Slack or Teams credentials, making sure that the resources are properly filled out. And then all you have to do is hit run and you're good to go. One last thing I want to point out is for this specific instance, since you're starting with an HTTP request, let's say you want to run this on a schedule. Let's say you want to run this every 24 hours. We make it really easy to enable scheduling on this action so that you can repeat it, in this case, every day at the same time. Now, let's take this to the next level with our story to remediate malware issues from Wiz using SentinelOne. Quick overview of what we're going to accomplish here. We're going to take in an alert from Wiz in real time using our webhook action. We're going to, again, create a nice, well-crafted Jira issue for the analyst. We're going to correlate the agent in SentinelOne, which, again, this Wiz alert makes it really easy to do so. Then we're going to enrich the alert with SentinelOne remote scripts. For those of you that might be a CrowdStrike shop, this is the equivalent to CrowdStrike RTR. Again, we are going to post a well-crafted message to the analyst channel in Slack and give them that exact same remediation prompt so that they can choose to either ignore the alert and auto-close it, or they will then isolate that particular agent from the network using SentinelOne, confirm this action was completed in an issue comment, and move that issue to done. So in order to run this real-life production scenario, I'm going to just send the sample alert over to this webhook. And here you'll see, again, that within the create issue in Jira, using their markdown syntax and Tines events, it's really easy to grab all of the relevant bits of context that you need to empower the analyst to make decisions as quickly as humanly possible. If we toggle over here to my Jira board, you'll see again that all that information is right in front of the analyst, and it's nice, well-crafted, and very easy to read. Then we go down here, and one thing I want to show off again with the trigger action is in the last example, you only saw where there was one rule to match on. But the cool thing with triggers is that you can set multiple rules in one action to match on. So in this case, we're looking specifically for malware that's on a virtual machine. So in order for this event to fire, both of these rules have to be met. However, we do also offer the option with our must match option, so that if you want to match on one or the other, based on the fact there are two rules, you can set a must match of one, and this creates the equivalent of or matching. Next, we hit the SentinelOne API, and we can confirm the specific agent that's related to this alert. And then we're going to enrich this alert with SentinelOne remote scripts. You'll notice that these remote scripts live within a group action. First and foremost, a group action allows you to reduce visual complexity on your story by consolidating multiple actions into a singular action. In this particular case, the reason why we've chosen to hide this specific part of the story within a group is that we are consolidating 4 different remote script runs at once. So thinking back to our other story here, something like a paginated API call would also be a great candidate to hide behind a group action, just to keep the visual complexity to a minimum. Let's dig into this group action real quick. So you'll see here that we're invoking each of the 4 remote scripts. And then what we're doing is we're putting in a delay here. And the delay is simply there so that while the remote scripts run, you give them a little bit of time to process. Then after some time, we go and we check on the status of that script execution to see if it's completed. And then if it's done, continue on. If not, go back, delay 30 more seconds, give the scripts more time to run until all 4 of these have been completed. Then once each of these remote scripts is completed, we can explode each of them so that for each individual instance, we can iterate through them and we can get the results. We can use Tines formulas to create a proper file artifact in order to upload as an attachment to that Jira issue. Then at the very end, I use the implode to just implode confirmation that all 4 script runs have been properly attached to Jira, which you can see here. If we go back into this issue, we now see the 4 attachments to the 4 different script runs, and the analyst has the ability to remediate. Once again, we have a nice, well-crafted Slack message here that echoes a lot of what is shown off in the Jira issue, but it allows the analyst to quickly toggle over and look at this specific issue. Once again, you'll see the same 2 prompt options from the last story. And since there's only 1 alert this time, I'm going to go ahead and hit remediate now. Again, you'll see that the prompt response has been recorded. And if we go back to the top level of the story, you'll see that since we chose the remediate path, we have isolated that particular host from the network using SentinelOne. And if we go back to our Jira ticket, you will see that the remediation action was taken to disconnect that host and that the issue is marked as done. So just to recap, we took in a malware alert from Wiz. We were able to determine that it was related to a virtual machine and then correlate it with the responding machine in SentinelOne. We enriched the script with the results of some SentinelOne remote scripts. We alerted the analyst channel again with Slack. And once again, within the Jira issue, we allow that analyst to see all of the proper context they need to quickly make a decision and use our prompts functionality to go ahead and execute on that decision making. While this story looks pretty visually simple on my screen, a process like this involves a lot of moving parts for an analyst. First, they have to actually go into the Wiz console in order to find an alert to investigate. Then they spend time handcrafting and manually creating the Jira issue and that Slack message that I showed you. Next, then they have to manually go into SentinelOne, find the machine themselves that's associated with the Wiz alert, and then go manually invoke those remote scripts, wait for them to the complete, grab the outputs of those, and manually upload those 4 files to the corresponding Jira ticket. And then finally, after all that, if they determine that they need to isolate it, then they need to go back into SentinelOne and manually isolate the host from the network and manually close the Jira issue. So even for something as visually simple as this, it's removing a lot of manual steps from the analyst's hands, which allows you to operate faster and reduce human error. Once again, we have this story example ready to go within our story library for you to instantly import and get some quick wins with this. These 2 workflows are really just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to securing your cloud infrastructure with the powerful combo of Wiz and Tines. It's easy to apply these principles to easily rinse and repeat these 2 stories that I've shown you today and apply them to all of the other alert types that Wiz provides for you in order to secure your ever-growing cloud footprint. This concludes my presentation, and we'll move on to Q&A. So last call for questions. If any other questions come to mind, please let us know in the box below this video. Otherwise, I will start to dive into some of the questions that were asked throughout the presentation. Thank you. All right. First question I got in the chat. Are there any in-depth resources on Teams messages and configuring adaptive card templates for Tines? Yes. So if you go to, bear with me here. If you go to adaptivecards.io/designer, you can use this to build the adaptive card exactly how you want. And then down below, it's going to populate the payload. And all you have to do is copy this payload and then make sure that any references to previous event data is configured. And then you're quickly and easily good to go. Any other questions? All right. It looks like we just got the one question in the Q&A. After this, if anything else pops into mind, feel free to find me on LinkedIn. Ask me any questions there. I'd love to chat with you guys. Otherwise, appreciate you hanging out for these 30 minutes and hope you have a wonderful rest of the day.